Hello and welcome everybody to my new chess video about the French two knights variation Sidelines Part 1. The reason for this video is the request from Nate. Thank you Nate on this point. I love to make this video for you and for the other chess lovers. Okay, let's start and don't talk too much. We start with pawn to e4. You have pawn to e6, knight to f3, d5 or knight to c3. This is the main and standard position in the French two knights variation. And from here we can have many different lines. The main move here is knight to f6, but we covered this in another video from me where we have French two knights variation, main lines and cool tricks. So in this video we look at pawn to c6 and pawn to c5, these two sidelines. The other sidelines with pawn to d5 and d takes e4, I make an extra video with part 2 for you. At first we look at the worst variation for black, which arises after pawn to c5. After this we have bishop to b5 check, and black has two possibilities, knight to c6 or bishop to d7. At first we look for knight to c6. Then we can simply take the d5 pawn, and after e captures we have queen to e2 check, and after bishop to e7 or bishop to e6 we have completely different variations. At first sight we look for the worst move, which is bishop to e7. Now we can directly jump in with knight to e5 and attacking the knight on c6 twice. Black has only one logical move at this point, and this is queen to d6. And after that we play very directly with pawn to d4, and we're offering the whole pawn. So black has two choices. The by far most often played move is c captures on d4, which is very logical. And the other move is pawn to a6, which is only the computer move, but I think we don't have to look too much at this move because nobody of your opponent will play this move. Okay, let's see what will happen after c captures on d4, but actually here, if your opponent takes the pawn on d4, he's completely in our threat. Because now we can play bishop to f4, we have a discover check on the queen, and this looks very dangerous. So let's see what can happen. Black has only one good and logical choice, and he has nothing better to do than to capture the knight on c3. But then we can simply continue with our plan. And this starts with knight captures on c6, then we have queen captures on f4, and then discover check with knight captures on e7. And the king has two ways to go. If he goes to f8, completely losing because he loses the queen or is checkmate. And on the other hand, he can go queen to d8, which is also a very bad position. Okay, let's have a look at first for the move king to f8. But then we can play knight to g6, have an attack on the queen, and on the other hand we are threatening checkmate on e8. So completely winning position. But what will happen after king to d8? After king to d8 we can simply capture the pawn on d5, attacking the queen, and now black has nothing better to do than to exchange the queens. Queen to d2 check, we have queen takes, pawn captures and king captures. And at the end of the story, we can look at this position. White has developed two minor pieces. We are ready to bring our rooks into the game. For example, rook to d1 and rook to e1. And this is all in all a winning position for white. I also will show you now the move pawn to a6. I promised that for you. And after this we can have a forced continuation, which is also fine for white. And this is d captures on c5, queen captures on c5, and then we play bishop to e3, threatening the queen. Queen has to go back to the d6, and then bishop captures knight on c6, and after pawn captures we can also play bishop to f4, and we have this discover move with the knight and attack on the queen. So this is, I think all in all, it is playable for both sides, but I think it's a tricky position for black also. So that was the computer move, but I think it is not too important to notice. Let's jump back into move number 6, when black plays the stronger move bishop to e6. And here, remember, please don't play knight to e5 now, because the simple answer will be rook to c8, and black is completely fine. Now, after bishop e6, we have to play more directly with pawn to d4. And at first sight, I have to say, c takes on d4 is a very bad choice, because after this we can recapture with the knight, and we have this double attack, and that will break some nasty holes in black's position. So not a good idea. But what will happen after knight to f6? Then we can immediately pin the knight on f6, and after bishop to e7, we can simply capture the pawn on c5. Then we have castle on the king side, and now very important, castle on the queen side, activate the rook on d1, very good move in this position. And now I can show you how a game can continue with pawn to a6, and then a very strong move, bishop to c4. You can also play bishop d3, it is also fine, but the best move is bishop to c4, because he cannot capture back, because the queen is hanging on d8. So he has to play a move like queen to a5, and then we have a simply forced continuation, which is after bishop captures on f6, bishop captures, and then we have knight takes on d5, bishop takes, and queen takes. And at the end of the day, when we look at the position, white is one pawn ahead and also have the active rook on d1. All in all, it's a better position. You only have to exchange queens and activate your queen more. Maybe queen to e3, then you have queen here and queen to b3. Black can nothing do very much, and yeah, white is better. Let's jump back into move number 4, where we looked at the move knight to c6. But black can also play bishop to d7, which is a very logical move. And here we have a good continuation after pawn captures on d5, pawn captures on d5, and queen e2 check also. And after queen to e7, we just capture the bishop with check. Knight is developed, and now here comes knight captures on d5, and white is one pawn ahead. This is plus 1.6. Okay, that was the most complex variation with pawn to c5, how to punish them very quickly. Another sideline which is very popular for black is pawn to c6, so I think you have to know how to play such a position. Let's have a look. At first, we want to develop our pieces and make space with pawn to d4. After that, here is very strong and popular move by black, bishop to b4, and then we will advance with e5 pawn to create some strong attack on the king side later on. Here, black plays the logical knight to the e7. We also just develop our pieces with bishop to e2, and then comes the break in the center with c5. Now it is the right time to castle on the king side, and after that maybe black can capture the knight on c3, and after pawn captures we get a little closed position, but I think it is not easy to find some good counterplay for black. So let's go back. A very logical choice because of this is knight to c6. The good side on knight to c6 is now that our knight on c3 can be active in this game, so we play immediately knight to b5 and are threatening to play knight to d6 with check. That will be a horrible game for black. Black cannot ignore this, so he has to capture the pawn on d4, then we recapture with the knight on b5, and then black plays, for example, knight to g6, attack this pawn on e5 twice, because this is a very important pawn in this game. But now we play only attacking moves. Black doesn't have any fun in this game, and I show you now why. the first attacking move, what we're playing is pawn to c3. Bishop maybe goes to c5. Then we can play bishop to g5, attacking the queen. He has to play queen to d7. Then we play the next active move, bishop b5, pinning this knight. He needs this knight to attack the advanced pawn on e5, so he plays pawn to a6, attacking the bishop. And then we play the next attacking move, queen to a5. He cannot capture the bishop because the rook is hanging, so he has to do something. Best move and logical move from Stockfish will be pawn to h6. But also then we have a very tricky move, which is bishop to e3, threatening to give a discover move or a discover check on the bishop because the bishop on c5 is not protected. So he has to forcefully retreat the bishop to the a7. And then we have a forced continuation where white can reach an advanced endgame. So let's have a look at this. Bishop captures on c6, then we have bc6, we have queen captures on c6, and then after queen captures, knight captures, bishop takes, pawn takes, we reached an endgame where white is one pawn ahead and have a very solid position. And namely, I have to say that we have 3 pawns on the queen side, black only 1 pawn, and soon or later we can push these pawns and go for a win. Okay, this was the first sideline video in the 2 knights variation. I hope you learned something from that. You can use this in your own games. Please let me know if you have some questions and I can do something for you because that's my passion. I try to help you all. And yes, that was it for today and I see you. Bye bye.